Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today for a cool webinar on two big features that we released at the beginning of this year with aggregations and automations. Join us with Zach Soflin here, our CEO at Layer, and Georgios, the Director of Customer Experience. Together, we will show you today a couple of examples on those features that we just released, as I said. So without further ado, I'm just going to pass it on to Zach Soflin and with the automations and aggregations.
Awesome. Thanks, Georgios. Today, we're really excited to be launching these two features. In particular, automations is something that our customers have asked for a long time through the lens of asking for customized ways to notify team members, send emails, or create elements within Layer based on some action. Instead of adding a slew of customization options to our interface, we decided to just build out a automation engine that would allow you to basically define certain triggers that cause events. And so I'm going to walk through a few examples here just to kind of position this for you. So if you click on this, this is the screen that you will see at the beginning. So in order to create an automation, all you do is click here, and then you can go ahead and name your automation. So in this case, this example, I should say, I have a punch list, a list of issues category, and I basically want to send a notification when each one of these items is completed to the person who created the issue, essentially. So fairly straightforward and simple. So I'm going to name this when issue is complete and notification. Okay, so automations themselves are made up of really two different sections. We have triggers and we have actions. And so a trigger is basically something that triggers the automation to run. And so we have right now 5 triggers, and this is something we'll continue to add to as we improve this feature as well. So right now, you can trigger an automation based on when an element is created within a category, when an element is updated within a category, when an element in general is updated, and then also when an element within a category is updated. And then you can also specify or have this trigger based on when an element matches a particular filter. And in that case, that's one we're going to use here for this punch list issue. So I'm going to choose this one. And then we basically fill in the details for this side. So here I'm going to say, I want to select the punch list issues category. And we're going to specify a filter based on items in the category. So I'm going to say, whenever a punch list issue has a status of completed. All right. So now we have our trigger set up, and I can move on to my action. So again, anytime a issue within my punch list issues category, anytime the status is completed, it will trigger this automation. So now under actions, I can choose a new action. And you can see we have 5 different actions as well. So creating an element, updating an element, updating a Revit parameter, sending a notification, and sending an email. In this case, I just want to send a notification. And here's where I can choose the actual user that it's going to notify. So in this case, you can choose manually, like from your list of users within the project, or you can also choose dynamically from fields within this category. So in this case, I want to send it to whoever created this issue. And I can say this issue is complete. Maybe I also want to include like some of the issue details. You can include information about the trigger by clicking on this plus button here, and you can bring in these fields dynamically. So I could say, hey, this issue is complete. Here is the description. And then I can add the issue description. And so now, since this action has been defined, we can create this automation. There we go. And so this automation is turned on. So anytime a element matches this filter, it's going to send a notification to my device. Okay, so I'm going to show you a few other examples of this. In particular, we can also create automations that are based on some type of schedule or trigger. So in this case, I'm going to create a new automation that every month create a task. There we go. And in this case, I'm going to choose the trigger and I'm going to say add a scheduled time. And you can see you can get pretty detailed with what this interval looks like. We can say every month, every 1 month, and then we can specify the day of the month. In this case, I'm just going to do it on the first. And now every month, it will create a task for me, or it will trigger this automation. And what I can do is I can choose an action to create an element. And I can select basically my team tasks category. And I can even specify field values when I'm creating this item. So in this case, I want to create a task where it's not completed and the task comments are such. So let's say upload models to shared folder. All right, so I can create that task, and now every month it will create a new element in my team tasks that has those values set. One thing to note here too, though, is that we can click here to create another action. So we can take multiple actions on a trigger. So I could also click here to send an email to a particular user as well with those same details. All right.
One of the things that I've been getting a lot about from our clients is a lot of like our interior designers, they have like a product specs that they actually want, their boss to review, or someone's responsible of actually approving the product specs. So I think for this particular people would be helpful to see how they can set up easily an automation where, when a product spec is proposed, that their boss will get a notification and say, hey, can you please like review this as needed? So I would say that would be a cool workflow to see.
Okay. Yeah. So an example of that would be like Giorgio said, I have this product specs category in my project. I have a couple different product specs here that are proposed, or the status is set to a proposed. And so I can create an automation that looks at when a product spec is approved, send an email to my boss, let's say, or something like that. So I can choose this filter here when an element matches a filter. I'm going to look at the product specs category and we're going to say when the status is approved. And then the trigger that we're going to create is send an email. If I had a person kind of assigned to this, I could send that dynamically. Otherwise, I could just send it to an email address or multiple email addresses if I wanted to. And we can define the subject. So I can say, I could even insert dynamically the name of the product spec or like the type. For example, you could say the type has been approved. And we can include the details in this message. So I could say, we could include the unit cost, the power requirement, etc. So you can kind of include any of these details from this item. So once I create this automation, now an email will trigger every time I move one of these items from proposed to approved. I'm going to do that with this one. Call this one approved. And I'm going to go and approve this one as well. And so now that both of those are approved, I'll receive an email. And if you're ever curious, like when automations have actually happened, you can actually go back into the automation and look at the activity. So here you can see that it ran twice. I can see what action it did. It sent an email to 2 email addresses, as you can see here. And again, we can see it for the second one that met criteria as well.
Sweet. And Zach, also, but in the meantime, while you were creating that new automation, what I did is that I went into to every month create a task automation, and I filled with a timestamp. So I actually made it to create a task while you were talking. So 9:15. So if you go in the tasks Now you can see that the bot created a task at 11:15 CST, which is your time. And then,
Nice.
yeah. So
Perfect.
you can collaborate on automations as well, and make sure that the whole team is under the same impression of how they should work.
Yes, let's talk about aggregations quick. So being able to summarize data within a category has been a pretty frequent request for us. That's something that we've delivered on this month as well. So if I go like to my product specs, for example, I can show you a few examples of this. So aggregations are ways to basically summarize data within a column in particular. So now you'll notice anytime you go within layer into a category, I can click on a column name and we've added this new summarize button. And so when you click on summarize, you have a few different options as far as like how you can actually summarize this data. So for example, I'm looking at my unit cost column that has a bunch of costs for these specifications in it. I can quickly sum all of those up. I can get an average, a median, a min, max, and a range of those prices. So like, for example, if I do a range, I can see the range between the minimum and the maximum unit cost. I can also look at the average or again, sum them all up based on this number as well. We can also summarize non-numeric columns as well. So for example, I have this type column and I can summarize this. You can see the options are a little bit less, but I can look at, for example, the percentage of these values that are empty. In this case, 0%. And you can see here I have on my status field, I can see basically the percent that are not empty of my status fields. So every field type, for the most part, you can summarize with the exception of a few. And so this is a Boolean field that is looking at percentage true, or you could just count up the total number of columns as well. One other example to show here is I'm going to go over to my punch list, for example, and with date fields, we can actually look at date ranges and other date specific summaries. For example, I can click here to summarize, and we've got our typical summarization options here. But then right below that, we have some date specific ones, like looking at the earliest date in the list, the latest date, and a date range. So you can see that if I look at a date range here, all of the due dates for these items basically range 50 days between them.
One of the things that I think it's important for Revit users, a lot of them are asking about, hey, like what I always do is that I create, Revit schedules where I'm tracking the area. Like I want to see like the area of the room or like track percentage of things that are happening inside the room, like maybe a base finish or a floor finish or a ceiling finish. How do I track percentages of that? So one of the things that I actually showed in that video is how do I use aggregations to try to, instead of creating like Revit schedules, because I mean, let's be honest, it's just not really user friendly. How to use aggregations inside layer to actually tackle something like that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're looking at our rooms category here coming from our model. So these are basically all of the rooms in our model currently. So I can actually summarize, like, for example, the area of all of these rooms by basically clicking summary, going to that parameter and summing all of it up. And you can see, I can see all of the square meters across all of my rooms. Let's say like I just wanted to look at the area of all of the classrooms or instruction rooms in this building. I can quickly create a filter for that, but we could add a filter where the name contains instruction. You can see it's filtering it down for all of my instruction rooms. And you can see that my area is updating accordingly. So I can quickly get a summary of all of the instruction rooms within my model. One other really nice thing that we've added for you current layer users is that we've reworked the way that you can create views in this release as well. So for example, if I wanted to just now, I've got this list of instruction rooms and I want to quickly create a view for it, I can either save changes to the current view, or I can click on this drop down and save as a new view. So with basically 2 clicks, I can create a new view that has these filters and settings already saved. All right. With that, I think that's all we have to show today. Again, we're really excited about what you're going to build with both of these features, and we'd love to hear from you, in particular with automations, your ideas for not only what you can build today, but what you would like to build with this feature in the future.
So I'm hearing actually very good feedback from the fact that those are great innovations, both the automations and aggregations. David was asking about integrations, third-party integrations, third-party systems. Can you talk briefly about integrations? Because I know this is something that we have on our roadmap.
Yeah. So one of the items that we have on our roadmap this year is few kind of key integrations into Layer. And we are setting automations up for a way to include those third party integrations, both in triggers and in actions. So definitely look for that in the future.
Zach, can you talk a little bit about the integration with Revit? I know this is something that we've talked about, but we have a couple of new fellows here that are not aware of integration with Revit, mainly how the back and forth works.
Yeah. So really quickly at a high level, basically to connect a model to Layer, you can either upload a model file manually, or you can click the publish button directly from our Revit add-in. So in order to get information from your model to Layer, you have to click the publish button or upload a version of your model. To get information from Layer back to Revit, we have a button in our add-in as well that allows you to sync data back to parameters with a click. So basically, you still have to click the button in the add-in, but it's basically instant, syncing that data back to your model. So good question. I also
Cool.
see a question about, when a category is updated, can we set up a trigger for when a category is updated? As far as a trigger goes, you can create basically when an element within a category is updated. And so essentially you can choose a category, and then you can optionally choose which field will trigger the trigger. Okay, I only want this to trigger when the spec or the type or the unit cost is updated. So you can get pretty granular with this. Otherwise, you could remove all of them and it would trigger any time an item within this category is updated. So play around with it and see what thoughts you have. We're excited to hear from our users on what these could be used for. Again, thank you for attending. And again, we're excited to see what you can build with these. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone.